Hello, and welcome to this discussion on research proposal project tips. I teach a research methods and program evaluation course, and one of the projects in the course is creating the research proposal. Dissertation students also do this, put together a research proposal, and then they typically will present the proposal to their dissertation committee, and they call it a proposal defense. And the committee will ask them questions and they will defend their research proposal. There's an old proverb, Proverb 17:22, that talks about how laughter is the best medicine. And so I like to start with something funny. And I remember when I was studying computer science for a semester, I heard this story, and again, this isn't theologically correct per se. This is just for strictly humor purposes. But Jesus and the devil were doing a computer programming competition, and God was the judge. And during this competition, the power went out, and the devil was really upset. He lost all his work, and at the end, God called time. And the devil said, Jesus must have cheated. What happened? How did this happen? That he printed off this beautiful program. And God said, oh no, he didn't cheat. Jesus saves. So I would always tell myself, Jesus saves and so should you. So remember to save your work. Hopefully that funny story will stay with you and help you remember as you're working on your research proposal to save your work. Okay, so one thing that I think is helpful is to begin with the end in mind. There was a book that came out a number of years ago by Stephen Covey, and he talked about the 7 habits of highly effective people, and how one of those habits is to begin with the end product in mind. And so if the end product is creating a research proposal project, so for example, in the research methods course, students towards the end of the 8-week term share in a discussion board a video of their research proposal presentation. They share that with their classmates. So I always encourage students to pick psychology or counseling related interventions that can be tested in terms of their efficacy, because counselors want to know, hey, what works? What tool can I put into my toolkit, to take into my work with my clients that will be effective and that will help them. And so we're looking into the research on these interventions, and as you look through those articles and as you peruse them, if you scroll down toward the end of the article and look at, let's say, the discussion section, the discussion section, the limitations section, the future directions section, all of these may offer you content related to gaps in the literature or limitations, things that need to be addressed in future studies to build upon what has been completed already in terms of research. So we want to make sure that we're contextualizing our study within the literature and developing our study based on a gap and what is needed in the peer-reviewed literature. And so if you can think of the gap as part of a funnel, so first you get this gap, and from the gap becomes a problem statement, then a purpose statement, a research question, hypothesis, which guides the research methodologies like the participants, the sampling procedures, the assessments, and the research design. And so it really all starts with this gap quote. Having a very clear gap is really key. So here is a sample, and let me just, since I'm sharing my screen, kind of show you one thought. If you look at, let's say this is a research article, right, that was published in the Virginia Counselor's Journal called The Impact of Brief God Attachment Workshop Attendance on God Attachment. So we see in the beginning, it starts with the abstract, and then if we scroll through, there's the literature review. Then when you get in the methods, there's information about participants, instruments, the methodologies, the procedures, the results, and then after the results, we get into the discussion. And this is the area where you might find a gap in the literature. So if we look through this, we can see, the purpose of the study was to determine the efficacy of the brief 4-hour God attachment workshops on improving one's attachment to God and well-being. The research team discovered a statistically significant decrease in avoidance but finding no other statistically significant increases or decreases in scores. This may be attributable to the stability of the population, as the participants were primarily college students and a relatively homogeneous Christian population. Let's see. Note, Beck and McDonald found the mean anxiety score on the AGI for a Christian population to be 47.03, while the mean AGI avoidance score is 41. So there may be a difference in mean anxiety. So the mean anxiety and avoidance scores in our sample compared to the population scored higher in AGI anxiety and lower in avoidance compared to the population. So that's interesting information, but not necessarily a gap. So as we scroll down, we're going to look for key words. Future. So future mixed methods and qualitative research should investigate how participants with low anxiety and avoidance on the attachment to God inventory manifest exploration in their narrative self-reports. So sometimes you have to read a little bit of the study to understand and what the gap is saying, and provide a little bit of a summary maybe in your own literature review or your own notes so you can make sense of it. But here, this is one gap that is pretty clear when you have that background information. And if we keep scrolling, you see another keyword here that's limitations. Limitations of this study include a small N design and relatively homogeneous population. Well, one of the challenges with data collection is you don't have control over how many participants you can recruit. If you have a really large grant and incentives and you can pay people to participate in the study, you have a better chance of recruiting a large population. But aside from that, it can be very challenging to attain a large sample size. So typically we don't want to use that as our gap. Next, future research may consider utilizing a population of individuals struggling with addiction who have high levels of avoidance toward God and romantic relationships. Okay, so this is a possibility that gap that we could address if we replicate this study. But let's say we go to a teen challenge or a facility where people have struggles with addictions, or maybe we work with AA or NA to see if it's possible to recruit participants to participate in survey research. Let's see. So we have here again that keyword future. Future research may seek to include individuals with initially higher levels of avoidance and attachment to God. Okay, so that's another clear gap. So this gives you an idea of how to find some gaps in the research literature. And then with APA style requires a page number for a direct quote. So with the in-text citation, we would say Knight et al. 2018, page 53, when we do that quote. So this is really the beginning, that process of inquiry where we're kind of surfing the peer-reviewed literature, using Google Scholar, the library databases, looking for gaps in the literature in terms of how can we, if you visualize the literature as this big wall of research, and if there's a gap, a brick missing somewhere, that you can contribute a study that helps strengthen what we know about an important topic of interest to you, and you can kind of add your brick to that wall and fill that gap. That's what we want to do here as we're beginning that process of inquiry. So I hope this helps you as you think about your research gaps, and I pray that the Lord would bless your work and bless your studies, and I hope this gives you some concepts to contemplate. Until next time, God bless you.